Yeah, just a big welcome to everyone here today. And in the spirit of reconciliation, Tien Institute would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we reside on, the Wodi people of the Dharawal Nation. And we pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend those respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Thank you for joining us today for what promises to be an insightful and engaging session. My name is Sylvia Neubacher, and I'm the Head of Program for the Master of Mental Health here at Tien Institute. It's a privilege to welcome you to this event, which is part of our ongoing NTI conversation series, where we explore topics designed to spark curiosity and foster knowledge sharing within our communities. Today's session, Nourishing the Mind, Insights into Food, Mood and Wellbeing, will explore the fascinating relationship between what we eat and how we feel, with a growing body of research highlighting the critical role of nutrition in mental health. This discussion is both timely and essential, whether you're a professional in the mental health field or someone looking to better support your own wellbeing or that of your loved ones. I'm delighted to introduce today's presenter, Lara Ryan. Lara is an accredited nutritionist and naturopath with extensive expertise in integrated mental health and wellness. She has a rich academic background, including a master's in international public health and professional experience as a senior lecturer, clinical supervisor, and practitioner. Her work focuses on supporting individuals with chronic health conditions and mental health challenges, and she is our subject coordinator for the mental health and nutrition subject in our Masters of Mental Health program. Her presentation today will serve as a bit of an introduction to this subject. There will be time for a Q&A at the end, so feel free to note any questions that come up during the session and pop them in the chat. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Lara Ryan.
Thank you, Sylvia. That was a great introduction. And a big thank you to all of you for joining us today for this presentation. I hope there's going to be some really good stuff for yourself, for your family, and for your professional knowledge as well that you can take home today. So what we're going to be having a look at today, we're going to have a look, it's food, mood, and well-being. So how everything that we eat and interact with affects our mood and affects our overall well-being. So we'll have a quick look at the link between our gut and our brain. We're also going to look about how the gut's involved in making neurotransmitters, which is really interesting. We're going to have a look at the importance of the gut microbiota, or our gut flora, all those wonderful bugs that live in our gut. We're going to have a look at what it means to have a healthy gut and good absorption of food. We're going to look into really nourishing food and how we can look after ourselves. We're going to have a little bit of a look at vitamins, minerals, good oils, and those nutritional supplements that are really supportive of mental health. And then we're just going to touch on some mindful eating as well, because that's also a very valid part of what we're going to be looking at. So I want to introduce you to the field of nutritional psychiatry. And this is basically, there's a lot of research that's coming out on it at the moment, as there should be. And it's all about how our diet, how nutrition, how food affects our mental well-being, and knowing that there is a huge correlation between these two, and that we can actually have power over what we're eating and what we're taking into our bodies to make ourselves feel happier, to have a clearer brain, and to have better cognition. So we do refer to it as nutritional psychiatry. And if you went on a little bit of a Google rabbit hole, you would find lots of interesting information in this field, lots of great books to read and lots of great research papers. But we're going to talk about it from a very introductory point about how it works. How does what we eat, how our gut works, and our brain and mood all tie in together? Where is that connectedness and where is that link? So one thing that I really want to bring forward right at the beginning is just to talk about the fascinating link between our gut and our brain, and how the two talk to one another and how they're able to have this communication. So we call this communication system the gut-brain axis. And basically it is a two-way communication. So the brain communicates to the gut and the gut is able to feed information back to the brain. It's this two-way communication system between what we call the gut, so our digestive system, which is our stomach and our bowels and our pancreas and our liver, between the nervous system, which includes the nerves that run from those organs to the spine and then up to the brain. And we're going to have a look at all of that connectiveness today. So to sort of put us in the right place and understand how this is all working, we'll do a brief little touch on some anatomy and physiology, because I really want you to understand how the gut and the brain do communicate. So in our little diagram there, we've got, it looks like a beautiful lotus flower, but it's meant to represent our brain and our spinal cord that's coming down there. And you can see there's some really important nerves coming out. So our brain and our gut communicate via the vagus nerve, which is one of these main nerves that comes out of our spinal column and reaches into the gut. They communicate via the microbiota, which is all of those bugs that live in our gut. The goods, the bads, and the whole colony of them that live in there, they communicate via those bugs as well. And they also communicate via neurotransmitters, which, as we know, are our messengers that travel around the brain and the body and tell the brain and the organs what to do. It's how the brain says, produce hormones, produce digestive enzymes, tighten that muscle. That's what neurotransmitters do. They're messengers that travel around the body. So these are 3 ways that our gut and our brain can communicate. And you can see in that little diagram, it's labeled vagus nerve, and there's that beautiful nerve that comes out from the brain stem there, but it reaches into all of those areas. So our stomach, our large intestine, our small intestine, and actually the very lining of the gut itself, which is our enteric nervous system. So that's the nerves that are within the lining of the gut itself. So it's set up for this fantastic communication that happens. And you might have heard, if you've done a little bit of reading or looking into this, of the term that our gut is our second brain. And with this amount of communication, that's actually quite true. So our gut is, if you think about our digestive system, it's basically a big open tube. It starts from our mouth and circles around and goes all the way through and comes out the other end. So what our gut is able to do is really monitor the external environment. At all times, it's taking in what the air that is in our mouth, it's taking in the food that we eat, it's taking in what we drink, it's taking in any bugs or pathogens that might come in along the way. And it's monitoring all of this external environment and sending messages and information back to the brain so that the brain can make choices. If maybe we've been on an aeroplane and we've taken in some bacteria because the person next to us has got a cold, that information goes into the stomach, via the nervous system gets sent to the brain, and the brain says, right, let's increase our immune response. We know there's a bug in there, we'll increase the immune response. So it's an amazing system that protects us. And it is this vagus nerve that's the main nerve that carries all of these messages. Now, these signals that we talked about, as I just said, it can affect our immune system, but these signals will also affect, and they've got really strong effects on our mood, on our cognition, and our behavior, and therefore all of our mental health. So you've heard me mention the gut microbiota. You might have also heard of this as the gut microbiome. You might have heard of it as the gut flora. And I'm sure you've seen ads in magazines or on television to take your probiotics, and there's dancing little blue bugs that talk about being good bugs for the gut. So let's just have a little bit of a chat about what that is. So in our gut, we've got a colony of microorganisms, and together they're known as the gut microbiota, or as I said, our gut flora. So this is trillions of little bacteria, microbiotas, and they line the tract of our gastrointestinal system, of our gut. And they're there to do all sorts of jobs. They create an immune response, they help us break down our food, they help us ferment our food, they protect the wall of the gut. They play a big role in that immune system. So actually up to 80% of our immune cells live in our gut, which makes sense when you think of it as the place that we connect with the external world. We really want all of our immune system there because that's where we're taking in and working with our external environment. But another really interesting thing that our gut flora does for us is it produces neurotransmitters. And we always think of these neurotransmitters as being in the brain. You know, this is what makes us think and feel and do and act and behave the way we do. But a lot of our neurotransmitters are actually produced by the gut microbiome, and they exist in the gut and they work as messengers via that vagus nerve to take messages to the brain. So now we're starting to see how the mood and you know, sadness and happiness and depressive symptoms can actually be linked to the gut because a lot of it's going on in the gut. Okay, So as I said, our gut microbiota is producing neurotransmitters, and it produces a lot of them. But the two big ones that I think are important for us to have a look at today is serotonin. So serotonin is known as our happy hormone. When we've got serotonin circling in our nervous system, that's where our mood is lifted. It influences a positive mood, it helps sleep really well, and it gives us a healthy appetite. So 80% of our serotonin, which is a major brain chemical, is actually produced in the gut by the gut flora. So that's really interesting stuff. What a huge link between the gut and the mood. Another one that's produced there is one called GABA, and you'll be tested on this later. That stands for gamma amino butyric acid. I'm only joking. You don't need to remember that. That's why we call it GABA. But GABA is our calming neurotransmitter. So GABA is the one that brings us back down. If you've had quite a stressful day and you've been multitasking and you've been thinking and your anxiety's been a little bit up and you're feeling a bit wired, when you finally get home and have that cup of tea and you feel yourself go, oh, that feeling is the GABA kicking in. So our gut produces that GABA. So you can imagine if your gut's not doing very well, if that gut flora is out of balance and we're not making enough GABA, we don't get the full amount that we need when it's time for us to calm down. And this is another reason why we can have ongoing heightened anxiety, or even if it's not full anxiety, it's the overthinking, it's the worrying brain, it's the brain that won't let you sleep at night. We need GABA to help calm that down. So very important neurotransmitter. Now, I've included this little infographic because I just think it brings everything in together and it's really interesting. So what happens when things go wrong in the gut? So we can see from our little picture in the middle, this gut is not healthy. He's obviously having a terrible time up there with his hamburger and his bottle of beer and his cigarette hanging out of his mouth. So all of those things have contributed to this gut not being healthy. So the first thing that we've got is we've got impaired absorption of healthy nutrients. So first thing is we've got no good gut flora. We're not breaking down our food properly and we're not getting that nutrition out of it. The other thing that starts to happen is we get gut inflammation. So the tissues of the gut wall will actually become inflamed. And we've probably all felt this at one time or another. If you've ever had a gut virus, like a gut flu, if you've ever maybe eaten a curry that was too hot for you, if you've ever felt bloated and inflamed at the end of the day, or eaten a food that doesn't agree with you, and you get that sore, tender, bloated feeling, that's gut inflammation. Now, what happens when our gut is inflamed? Messages travel to the brain and we get minor brain inflammation as well. So I want you to pay attention. Next time you're feeling upset in the tummy because you've eaten something not right, or maybe got some sort of bug in there, like a virusy type thing, pay attention to how your brain is working as well. And you will find that your brain, your cognition won't be as on the ball. You'll find you probably feel a bit sad. They call it a sickness behavior, where you just want to be home and crawl under the blankets and feel miserable with yourself. So you'll just notice next time your tummy feels off, what's happening in your brain as well, because there's a definite link there. And the reason that happens is that when we haven't got a healthy gut, there's changes in our brain in cytokine and peptide secretions. So again, it's that sickness behavior. The brain's going to change. Cytokines are the messengers that tell us to be inflamed. So if we've done something to our gut to cause inflammation, it creates cytokines, and cytokines will now travel to the brain. The other thing that can happen when our gut's upset is we start missing those messages about when we're full or when we're hungry. So our body's actually got its own way of regulating. There's hormones called leptins, and there's a few other different hormones that actually do a feedback mechanism. So the stomach says to the brain, I'm full now, we can stop. But if our gut isn't working very well, we don't get those messages. And there's a really interesting field of research at the moment that's looking at people that are prone to obesity and actually examining their gut flora. And they're finding that the majority of people with obesity have got a specific imbalance in their gut flora. So they're doing research now in giving supplemented probiotics of this specific type of gut flora and watching people actually lose weight because they're getting better messages about being full and having had enough to eat. So it's really interesting research that's happening. So down on the other side, we talk again about those neurotransmitters. So when our gut's not healthy, we're going to have the reduction of another neurotransmitter called dopamine. And dopamine, again, it's sort of a happy hormone, but you've probably all heard about dopamine. It's what we get when we get a thrill. So they say this is our big problem with social media at the moment, is it's giving us a dopamine hit every time that we use it. So dopamine, again, is something that's produced in the gut. And when we've got low dopamine, we're going to have mood swings. We're going to feel depressed. We're even going to have a low libido, and nobody wants that. So we need a healthy gut flora to be producing that dopamine. Then we've got reduced GABA that we've just talked about. So with low GABA, we're going to have feelings of anxiety, feelings of fear, feelings of overthinking. We talked about the serotonin, a reduction in our serotonin, our happy hormone. If we don't have enough of that, we're going to feel depressed. We're going to have a low mood. And that leads to things like lack of motivation, lack of wanting to connect with our friends and family. So it has knock-on effects in all sorts of ways that we don't get to enjoy life to the fullest like we would like to. The other messenger that comes in is melatonin, and melatonin is our sleep hormone. So at the end of the day, when the sun goes down and the world becomes dark and quiet, and we are meant to then live by yellow light around the campfire or because of our candles, that actually stimulates the optic nerve to the brain to release melatonin. Melatonin also created in the gut flora, and melatonin floods our brain to start that sleepy phase. So we start feeling tired, we might start yawning, our eyes will feel a bit droopy, our body will want to flop a little bit more. So melatonin is that lovely hormone that leads us into sleep. And if we have got an upset gut, we're not going to have enough melatonin for when our eyes register that it's dark and it's the end of the day. We don't have enough of it to send those messages out to the body systems and the brain to say we're ready to sleep. So just in looking at this diagram here, we can see how many things are affected when our gut's not in a healthy state. Okay, the other little thing I thought I would touch on is actually the health of the gut wall itself. So this diagram here, just to orientate you as to where we are in your body, the tubey bit along the bottom is actually a blood vessel. So you can see your red blood cells in there. So the wall of our gut underneath the tissue itself is a blood supply, and it's a rich blood supply because it's going to take all the nutrients that come from our food through the gut wall into the blood, and the blood then takes it off to nourish our body. But I want you to have a look at this diagram, and on one side you'll see we've got normal gut. So these 4 little standing soldiers here, they're our healthy gut cells. So obviously this is a diagram of it, but I think it's a good representation. So these guys are healthy. We can see up the top, there's a lovely yellow layer of healthy mucus that's full of all of a well-balanced, healthy gut microbiome. So we've got the pathogens and things in there, but there's a healthy microbiome that's protecting those cells. You'll see the cells are thick and full, and they're all standing tightly together. So they're all joined, and we call that a tight junction. Where those cells are nice and stuck together, it's a tight junction. So nothing can get through. They're standing like little soldiers protecting that blood supply of things that are coming through. So any bacteria or any virus or maybe some food that's a little bit off that's not good for us, we've got a few layers of protection. We've got a lovely mucus layer, we've got those tight, healthy cells, and then we've got the bloodstream. So there's a whole lot of stuff that happens to anything that's within the tube of our gut before it gets to the bloodstream. Now, if we have got a gut that's not so healthy because it hasn't been nourished, maybe our gut flora is a little bit out, maybe we've got some inflammation going on, we can see over on the other side, those gut cells are not looking so plump and lovely. So they've shrunk a little bit. They're a little bit dehydrated, they're a little bit starved, and as they shrink, it creates gaps between those cells. Now, when we've got a gap between those cells, it allows the pathogens to get through in between the cells and go straight into the bloodstream. And this is when we start feeling sick. This is when we get headachy, we feel sluggish, we feel brain foggy, because all of a sudden we have got things that shouldn't be in our bloodstream. And then we've got the liver needing to deal with it, the kidneys needing to deal with it because they help us eliminate. We've got our lymphatic system that helps us eliminate. So those things are now working extra hard to try and get out some of this toxic, yucky stuff that really should never have made it through the gut wall if we had a healthy, strong gut wall. So I'm just showing you this because I want to talk a little bit about what can we do? What can we do to have a healthy gut to make sure that we're getting good nutrients in? So one of the things that the research shows up again and again is that a plant-based vegan or vegetarian diet is excellent for having gut healing. It really helps those cells become healthy and plump again. So it really promotes an increase in our diverse and stable healthy gut bacteria. So while we talk about those gut bacteria being good or bad, it's more about balance. They all live in there healthily, but it's about the balance of how many of the goodies, how many of the baddies, and we need to have them all working in harmony. And a plant-based diet really supports that. It creates a diverse amount of bacteria, it stabilizes the healthy bacteria, and it can create a really nice environment there for us. What these plant-based foods also do is they really assist in decreasing the pathogenic bacteria. So if we've got a gut lining that's full of all the good bacteria, there's no space for those baddies to come in. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to grow all of those good guys so there's not as much space. And they'll always be there. There'll always be a bit of candida. There'll always be a little bit of something from somewhere. But as long as we've got a bigger amount of the good bacteria, that bad bacteria isn't allowed to take over and make us sick. The other thing a plant-based diet will do is it really provides dense nutrients, minerals, vitamins. So when we've got that good gut wall, we're getting this really nutritious food in. And that's going to support our body, but also our mind, because we need those good nutrients to support mind. And I'm going to go into some of those nutrients just in a minute. Plant-based food is also anti-inflammatory. So we talked about the gut having inflammation. And inflammation, there are foods that are known to be more inflammatory. Things like gluten, dairy foods are sometimes known to be inflammatory for some people. So we know that a plant-based diet is very anti-inflammatory. And quite often, if people have got, arthritis-y things, aches and pains, getting migraines, if we can clean up that diet a bit, really quickly the body will respond and will reduce the inflammation in the body. And we can see that in blood tests, that inflammatory markers come down. And these foods they're really high in dietary fiber, in antioxidants, in our good fats, in different phytochemicals that work to protect us against the breakdown of tissue and against cancer tissue, cells starting up. And we've got some really good vegetable proteins as well that help keep our blood sugar balanced. So plant-based eating is a really nice way to start to heal our gut. And the research supports this. So in many studies, but this one just showed it really well, it's found that vegetarians reported significantly lower results on their DAS. And the DAS, for any of you that already work in mental health or have done some work in the medical field, DAS is a really commonly used assessment questionnaire that looks at depression, anxiety, and stress scores. So vegetarians had a lower total result on their DAS result, but they also scored lower on the individual results for depression, anxiety, and stress. So a plant-based diet is addressing all of those sections of our mood and our mental health. And this is another interesting food scale that's been released as well, and it's called the antidepressant food scale. And you'll see there's two lists there. So we've got our top plant foods for people that want to go to a plant-based diet, and then people that are still enjoying eating animal protein as well, because animal protein is great for balancing our blood sugar and giving us certain nutrients. We've got a list there of the top in either camp. Now, this food scale was really created to sort of look at and identify the best foods that will both prevent and then also promote recovery from any of those depressive symptoms. So, it's doing all those good things that we talked about with healing the gut, getting the good microbiota helping, and giving us good nutrients, which is really good. So very evidence-based approach on knowing which foods actually support good mood in human. It's a really nice little food scale. So now I want to talk about the key nutrients themselves. So when we are eating food, what are we getting out of that food that's really going to support our mental health? And what can we start adding into our diet to make us feel better, create more of those good, happy neurotransmitters, which is what we want, to feel more motivated, to feel more engaged and more connected with the life that we're living. So there is a really big correlation between vitamin deficiencies and mental health issues. They've done a lot of research with depression, with anxiety, with stress response. And we do find that when someone's body is lacking a lot of these nutrients, there's going to be a higher amount of depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, because we're just not nourished. We're not getting in what we need. So I'm going to go through a few of these. And when we look at nutrition, we look at it in terms of vitamins, of minerals, and also of essential fats. Fats are really important for our body. So I've pulled one out of each to just speak briefly about today. So the first one I want to look at is our B complex nutrients. So a B complex is a group. We've got 8 different B vitamins, and you've probably heard of B1, B2, B12. B9 is folic acid that you might have heard of. So we've got 8 of these water-soluble B vitamins. And when I say something's water-soluble, it means that we need it on a daily basis because we eat it, we utilize it, but anything that's left over, we will pee out. It's water-soluble. It moves and flows through our bodies. So our bodies don't store it. And that's why we need to eat healthy food every day. You know, it's one thing to have I've had my one meal this week of B vitamins. It doesn't work like that. We need to nourish ourselves every single day. So there's 8 water-soluble B vitamins that work for us. Each of those vitamins got different function in the body, but what they do is they play a really big role in energy production and a lot of the functions and messages that impact our heart, particularly our brain, and the cells themselves and the function of the cells. So our Bs are really important. And I just wanted to show you this quick little chart that I pulled out of a research paper. And this just showed the behavioral effects that come from a deficiency of those specific B vitamins. So you can see listed down the side, B1, B3, B5, B6, B7, B12. But the list there are things like apathy, confusion, irritability, poor short-term memory, dementias, depression, lethargy, hallucinations, fatigue, impaired memory and intelligence, nerve damage, hysteria, low mood, winter blues. So we can see again how much of our mental health is really linked into these B vitamins. And in my own clinic, if anyone comes to me complaining of any of these things, or if they've just been through a really stressful time in their life and are still trying to come back together, B vitamins are one of the first place I start in what I'm recommending in their food and maybe what I might recommend in supplementation as well, because they're that important in mental health. So there is obviously the option of supplementing, and this is something that you may or may not want to do. We saw some beautiful foods in that first image that B vitamins are in, all of our green leafy vegetables, a lot of our meat and eggs, a lot of nuts. So a lot of those, again, beautiful natural whole foods that we eat are very high in Bs. But the interesting thing, and why I did want to put this in, is that research obviously shows that taking Bs will improve our mood. But there is this really good quote here that supplementing with B complex vitamins could have a positive effect on mood and mental health, even when a deficiency is not present. And that's something I find really interesting too. So here we're almost using these B vitamins medicinally. We're using them to create an outcome. So in the blood test, you might not show up as being too deficient. You might not be out of the range. But if you take some extra Bs or include some foods that are rich in Bs, you'll find that your mood will lift. So even without a medical deficiency, we're going to feel better with some more B vitamins on board. So really good one to have a look at. Next, I want to introduce you to one of our minerals. So remember we said we had vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids. So the mineral that is the most important in our mental health is magnesium. And I'm sure you guys have heard of magnesium. If anyone's ever had leg cramps in bed or done a bit of exercise or maybe built some IKEA furniture that left you all cramped up the next day, we've probably reached for some magnesium and stirred it into a drink or popped a couple of tablets. So magnesium, again, water soluble. It's an essential mineral and plays an absolutely vital role in so many parts of our good health. So water soluble means we need it daily. Don't think you can take one tablet in the week and everything's okay, because we're peeing it out as quick as we're taking it in a lot of the time, particularly if we're under stress. We use up a lot of magnesium if our bodies are under stress. Our adrenal glands use it up. Our liver uses it up as it sorts through all of the excess stress hormones. So we really need to increase our magnesium in times of stress. So you can see in the picture there, we've got some lovely foods. Bananas, really good in magnesium. Lots of those nuts and seeds are very high in it. And if you can see just down the bottom there, that beautiful block of dark chocolate. So this is your permission to include some dark chocolate in your diet because it's very high in magnesium. And it is a well-known thing for those of us that work in the nutritional field that if our patients are craving chocolate, they probably need some magnesium. So these are the people that late at night when all the work is done and their brain can finally slow down, they'll hit a cup of tea and a block of chocolate and maybe not know when to stop. And that's a really good indicator to me that this body needs more magnesium. So magnesium really supports things, healthy mood, nerve and muscle function, and it helps in converting our food into energy, which is what we want. If we're going to be eating all this beautiful, healthy food, we want to be making good energy out of it. So here's your little bingo card of the symptoms of magnesium deficiency. And you can see the things we've talked about there: the fatigue, the loss of concentration, anxiety, nervousness, poor digestion, maybe a little bit of heart palpitations along the way. So if you can tick a couple of those little images there, it might be worth having a look into including some more magnesium-rich foods in your diet. And just again, to bring it back to mental health. So magnesium really helps our mental health. And again, it's about calming. We talk about magnesium as being a sedative mineral, and that doesn't mean it's going to knock you out like a Valium. But what it does mean is for our brain to relax, for our muscles to let go and relax. Magnesium is a big part of that messaging system. So we really need magnesium to help reduce anxiety and a busy brain and an OCD and ADHD, all of these things. The magnesium is going to help bring us back down to base again. So it's a really good one to get onto. The other one I mentioned was our good fats. So I want to talk about good fats. Fats have had a very bad rap in the nutrition world. Good fats are excellent. Our brain is made of fat. Our nerves that travel, they have a covering on them, a little bit like an electrical wire that's got the metal in the middle and the nice rubber covering on the outside. They have insulation. So our nerves also have insulation, and this is made up of fats. The best fat that we can have is an omega-3 fatty acid. We need to get this from our diet. As I said, major structural component of our brain. So when it's part of our brain, it's playing an important role in cognition and in emotion and in mood with those neurotransmitters. The other beautiful thing about omega-3, natural anti-inflammatory. So we talked about that inflammation being a factor. Omega-3 will bring down inflammation. So it's something, again, we will use in the nutrition world. If someone's got arthritis, someone's got chronic inflammation, we will use omega-3. And part of bringing down inflammation is we reduce the cytokine messages. So we reduce any inflammation that might be going on in the gut or the brain. So what a great food to have. And again, you can see in that image, we've got beautiful things: fish, flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, almonds. And I always find it amazing how the walnut, when you eat them, it looks like a little brain. And within that walnut, we've got omega-3, we've got magnesium, and we've got B vitamins. I think it's almost like nature telling us that this amazing nut was made to nurture our brains. So it's a lovely little connection. Now, if you can't eat a lot of these foods, we can supplement. So fish oil is obviously a big one, and I'm sure you've all seen it on the health food store or pharmacy shelf. So fish oil is a lovely one that we can use. It is dependent on dose. Don't just take one capsule a day and hope. It needs to be treated like a food. So you need the equivalent of a whole tablespoon. So if that's about 4 or 5 capsules, or if you're doing a liquid, a whole tablespoon, you're doing that twice a day, you're going to get in the nutritional needs. Treat it like a food rather than a concentrated small tablet. If you are doing a plant-based diet and a vegetarian and vegan diet, you can actually get something called algal oil. And that does come from sea algae, but again, very high in omega-3. So that's an option as well. So omega-3 is just gorgeous. Cardiovascular health, it protects our heart and our blood vessels. It strengthens our immune system. We've got brain function and mental health. And look at that, it helps our gut flora and our gut health as well. So it's a great one to have on board. So if you were interested in looking at this more, there's a whole lot, there's other nutrients as well that are really empowered. And as I said, I just touched on one from each group today. But in the course that we do on nutrition and mental health, we delve a lot deeper into a lot of those other micronutrients. So there's a lot more to learn about nutrition in mental health. So I thought I'd just do a little bit of a summary for us. And just have a look at what we want to be doing in our daily life if we want to improve our diet and our gut health to have good, strong mental health. So we want to be eating lots of vegetable fiber. So fiber is a really important one. It detoxes our gut and it provides nutrients as well. And it creates food for the good bacteria that live in our gut. So good vegetable fiber is what they call a prebiotic. So that's like a little packed lunch for those good bacteria in our gut. We're directly feeding the good bacteria. I've mentioned there with fiber, we often think of fiber as things like cereals and bread and, you know, maybe muffins and things like that. And while they are a good source of fiber, I just want you to be aware that the gluten from that wheat fiber can cause gut inflammation. So we talked about gluten being a big one, and that's a whole other subject and rabbit hole that I invite you to go and Google on. You'll find some really interesting stuff. But just remember that if you're trying to get your fiber from things like wheat germ or cereals or breads, that gluten may be a problem for you. And it's worth maybe in 2 weeks, if you go gluten-free for 2 weeks, you will know if gluten is a bit of an inflammatory thing for you. It happens that quick. Your body will start to repair. So it's always worth having a play and seeing what suits and what works for your body. The other thing I'd recommend is including probiotic rich foods, or maybe taking a daily probiotic. So we've seen how important that gut flora is. So we really want to encourage it. And some other ways you can do that is with fermented foods. And I find it really interesting that most traditional societies always have their own version of fermented foods. If you've ever done traveling, you know, in Turkey, they have the ayran, in Korea, they have the kimchi, in Germany, they have the sauerkraut. If you go up into the Nordic countries, they've got the pickled herrings. Every traditional culture has got a fermented food. One reason was traditionally we didn't have fridges to keep everything fresh. But the other reason is they know the importance of a fermented, local, healthy food and how that introduces that healthy bacteria into the gut. So this is a great way to keep a good, strong, diverse, healthy gut flora in check, is to include those fermented foods along the way. So if you've got any favorites, or if you've got a bit of a family background or a lineage that has got fermented foods, I encourage you to ring up someone in your family and say, how did we used to make that? And start producing some fun foods in your kitchen. I really encourage you to have a range of colourful fruits and veggies. So anything with bright colour means it's packed full of antioxidants. So this is highly nutritious food. So your berries, any blueberries, red berries, your strawberries, your raspberries, your anything like that is going to be fantastic. Anything that's dark and green and leafy is really good for us. Broccoli is a superfood. Broccoli is not only full of B vitamins and of magnesium, but it's full of a substance called sulforaphane. And that contains sulfur, which helps our liver to cleanse itself. So in eating that beautiful fresh green food, you get your nutrients, but you're also helping your liver to get rid of anything that might be toxic, that might be hanging around as well. So we love bright green leafy foods along the way. And in that example, if you can get what we call your leafy greens that are bitter, you know, those lettuces like radicchio and the more bitter lettuces that you can buy in the supermarket, that bitter flavor, which is not common in Western culture, but quite common in other cultures, that bitter flavor actually starts off the digestive process. So it stimulates your saliva, stimulates your stomach to release some hydrochloric acid, stimulates your pancreas to release digestive enzymes. So when we start, which is the meaning of a side salad in a lot of meals, or, you know, some cultures have digestive bitters, or they'll have an aperitif before they eat. And that bitter flavor is what starts off a really healthy digestive process. So I encourage you to throw those bitter tasting, colourful foods into your diet as well. I've just put another asterisk there. If we are trying to heal the gut, so if you suspect that you've got quite an inflamed or leaky gut, cooked vegetables are excellent. When we cook things, we start to break them down before we eat them. So having a cooked vegetable is an excellent way to get it into the body. It means we haven't got to expend a lot of energy. Also having a warm food, again, I know in traditional Chinese medicine, they talk about if you're very low in energy, for us to be able to digest food, we need to heat it up. So if we eat cold food, our body uses energy to warm that food up before it can digest it. Whereas if you have a lovely vegetable stew, it's already part broken down and it's already warm. So it doesn't require as much energy of the body. It's why when we're convalescing or recovering from something, people will bring us soups and stews because of the nourishment that's in there. I encourage you to eat whole foods, do things as natural as the form they were born in. And I love this quote here by Michael Pollan that says, if it came from a plant, you can eat it. If it was made in a plant, don't. And I love that because I think it's just so true. If we ate like that, it really simplifies what feels like a very big problem. And I've got a favorite lecture of mine always used to say something like, if I can pull it out of the ground or chase it across a field, I'll eat it. But if I can't do any of that, I'm not touching it. And I thought that's such good advice. So where you can, natural form, organic if you can. We don't need extra pesticides in our diet. And obviously the less processing anything's been through, the better it is for our body. Our body would like to process that itself. And there's so many benefits to processing it within our body. So we've talked about considering a vegetarian plant-based diet, really beneficial. Remember to keep protein up. And one thing I'll say about blood sugar, and I'm sure you've all experienced a blood sugar drop, and if any of you have had to maybe make it through an exam time or make it through a busy period at work, you've probably gone munching on the sugar to lift your energy up, but that crash on the other side is terrible. That's when the brain fog kicks in. It's when we feel really sleepy. It's when we can't seem to make a decision about anything. And obviously it affects our mood. We start to feel a bit shaky. We get anxious. We start to feel very sad about things. So if we can keep our blood sugar balanced, so not peaking and dropping and peaking and dropping, we're going to have a healthier mood. We're going to be able to maintain our mood a lot better as well. The best thing for that is protein. So with every meal, if you can have a handful of nuts, a hard-boiled egg, if you can have some legumes, just try and bring in protein to every meal. And I will say it, breakfast is our most important meal. So try and include a protein with that, whether that's some yogurt, whether that's adding some protein powders, whether that is having an egg for your breakfast. If we can start the day with some protein, we're going to sustain that nice balanced energy throughout the day and not have these peaks and drops. So really important. All right, so quick little summary. Key factors to our healthy gain and gut-brain connection is that we want to have a really diverse gut microbiome. We know how important that is now. We need a healthy gut lining. So we want to make sure that sneaky little bacterias and toxic food things aren't sneaking into our bloodstream. And we want to have that healthy vagus nerve because that's the super highway between the gut and the brain. And if our gut is healthy and sending positive messages and positive neurotransmitters to the brain is healthy and our mood and our mental health is going to be so much better. So that's physically what we need to have that healthy gut. Now, just before we wrap up, I really want to introduce you to the concept, or maybe remind you of the concept of mindful eating. And I think this is something, particularly if you've been involved with Tien or have had a look at becoming involved with Tien, we talk a lot about mindfulness. We talk a lot about being very present and very aware. And this is a really, to eat mindfully, to have awareness in the food that we eat, it's a really valuable component in this intersection of nutrition and mental health, because we're both eating and being mindful of it at the same time. And the research, really supports this and shows that a lot of people have got lower levels of depressive symptoms when they come into a mindful eating space. So you can see there the benefits of mindful eating, and it really nurtures that deeper connection, both to our own body, so an awareness of our body, but also to the food that we eat. And that gives us better wellness overall, better relationships with food, improved digestion, lower stress. We make good choices. We decrease that emotional and stressful eating because we're aware of what's going on with us as we eat. So there's a lot of benefits to this mindful eating. And just to sort of go through a few of the principles of that with you, I think we just really need to be aware that these days we really multitask. We're go, 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 go all the time. And I know I'm terrible at it as well. I'm a mother. I work full time. I teach in the evenings. I've got all sorts going on, and I'm probably a terrible example of this. So even to put this together for you was a lovely reminder for myself. But to eat mindfully is to stop and to be aware, to not sit in front of the telly, to not be on our phones as we do it, but to really savor that moment and have that awareness. So to just observe the food that's in front of you, maybe how you prepared it, to be in the moment with it. So not still on your laptop and working at your desk at work, you're not having people come in and asking you questions, and then to savor and be aware of that food. And I always talk about, they say an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but there is another element to that if we really consider that apple, and rather than seeing it just as a quick snack as I run out to the car, if we can see that apple as the earth that, the tree grew in, the time it took for that tree to grow and produce that fruit, the care that was taken by the farmer to nurture the tree and then pick that fruit for us. And then the truck driver who got up at 4 a.m. to go and collect the fruit and bring it to the supermarket or the markets where we got it. And then the person at the market who carefully lays out these beautiful shiny apples for us to come and choose. And, the person that built our car that got us to the market to take the fruit. If we can have an awareness, it's that quick snack that's in your hand suddenly becomes a connection to the entire world, to our own bodies, to all of the people involved in bringing us that food, and to nature itself who provided it. So it's just such a lovely place to be with that food. So to go through it, we want to be aware, we want to be in the moment, we want to observe the food and everything that's going on in the environment around us as we eat. We want to savor that food and really enjoy it and take it in and notice our bodies. Are we hungry? Are we full? Why did I want to eat right now? Do I want to eat right now? Really have that lovely awareness and absolute non-judgment. If you didn't have an apple, if you grabbed a Mars bar instead, it's okay. Don't judge it. Just appreciate the fact that you have food and that there was love and consideration that went into that as well. So don't bring judgment into what you're eating, because nobody needs that. So that brings us to the end of our little talk today. And I just want to thank you for joining me. And I'm going to pass you back to Sylvia and just wish you a week this week of a really healthful, nourishing and mindful, happy eating. Try going without gluten, try including some protein, try one meal today that is mindful and brings you into a place of presence and awareness with your food. That's the challenge that I set you. But thank you. And I'll hand you back to Sylvia.
Great, thank you so much. So now it's time for questions, actually. So I'm going to open things up. I think we could probably even take questions verbally if people would like to speak, or you can just pop something in the chat if you prefer to do that, and then Lara can answer your questions. We've got a good sort of 10 to 15 minutes, so yeah, feel free to ask any questions that might have come up for you.
Any questions? Or I also invite you to maybe just reflect and let us know what you would like to try, or what you've become aware of, or something you might like to bring on into your own life in regards to healthy eating. Oh, we've got one in the chat. Mr. First, what would you recommend for ADHD, lupus, and diabetes food routine? Okay, they're three quite different conditions that we look at. But definitely the ADHD and the diabetes, the first thing I would want to do is get that blood sugar balanced. That would be my first approach, because both of those conditions are about ups and downs and ups and downs. So we would talk about getting whole foods in. We would talk about bringing protein in to that meal. We'd also talk about anti-inflammatory foods, because both of those conditions, while vastly different, involve inflammation. In ADHD, it's more of a brain and gut inflammation. In diabetes, we're looking at inflammation of what we call the endothelial tissue, which is the soft tissue that makes up our blood vessels and the valves in our heart and all of those sort of things. So that would be the first thing. I would look at blood sugar. For lupus, I'd definitely be heading for an anti-inflammatory diet. So for those of you that don't know, lupus is an autoimmune condition where the body starts to attack some of its own cells, and it's a really tough thing to have to deal with. But one of the main things that happens in that is inflammation. So I'd really be going for those omega-3s. I'd be going for the magnesium. I'd be getting off gluten. I'd be getting off dairy. I'd be looking at any food allergies or intolerances to bring down inflammation. Okay, the list of antidepressant foods, it is, if you just pop into Google, the antidepressant food list. And Sylvia, we've got access to these slides, don't we? Everyone's got access to the slides if they want.
Look, if people would like the PowerPoints, then if they could perhaps send us an email, that would probably be the best way, or into the chat even, but you probably don't want to put your personal email into the chat. So
you can private chat. If you want to send it to Sylvia, in the chat there's a drop-down box where you can send a message to everyone, or you can choose one person. So if you want to use the drop-down box and just send it to Sylvia,
do that, and then I can send them.
You can collect it, But it is, you can also Google it. Antidepressant food list, you can Google and it will come up for you, definitely. Yeah. Elizabeth.
Hi, Lara. Thanks a lot for this talk. It was really helpful. And I'm wondering what you think about the low FODMAP diet. I've tried it for a few weeks and it seems so fragmented and complex and expensive to try and stick to it. And I just wonder, I have sort of instinctually don't trust diets that cost more to follow and aren't holistic, What do you think about it?
Look, FODMAPs, the research into FODMAPs is very clever. And it's about how our gut ferments food. So it looks at, so just for the rest of you, FODMAPs stands for something, I can't even remember. Again, you can Google it. But it's about looking at which foods cause different ways of fermentation in our gut. So if people are getting a lot of inflammation, a lot of bloating, a lot of gas, a lot of indigestion, FODMAPs can be incredibly helpful. It's also quite anti-inflammatory. But to do it, and where probably my problem, Elizabeth, lies, and maybe yours does too, that in FODMAPs we do cut out a lot of fruit and vegetable. So it's looking at these particular people with these digestive problems don't have the enzymes to be able to break down that good vegetable fiber that we were talking about. So while I appreciate it short term as a way of reducing symptoms, in my thought process, the problem actually lies in that the digestive system is not working properly. And if we
that
can
makes sense.
improve the enzyme release, and if we can improve the gut flora so that we're properly breaking down these foods, we're going to get improvement.
So you would just go at it with a much more balanced diet, covering all of the food nutrition that you've just talked about.
We talked about those bitters that encourage enzymes, and others will do it. Things like ginger is very good. Garlic let's balance out our gut microbiota. So there's a lot of very affordable everyday grocery items that we can bring in that will really encourage better digestion rather than having to be so strict along the way. That said, short term, you know, I have had people do it for sort of 6 weeks at a time just to bring down the inflammation and drop the symptoms. But by then in the background, we're doing stuff to really encourage good digestion. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
Any other questions? I've got one for you if no one else would like to ask. So what would you say would be the 3 most important things a person could do if they've got a mood disorder, for example? Like if you just wanted to wrap it up in 3 key things, just to put you on the spot.
Absolutely. Look, I really think that whole food thing is so important. Just by shopping, and you know, I will often describe it to my own patients. I say, when you go into the supermarket, don't go into the middle aisles. Just walk around the edge. Do the veg section, maybe do the eggs and the meat section. Don't go to the freezer aisle either, but do the outside of the pantry, or start shopping at your local farmers markets if you've got one, because you're less likely to find packaged and processed food there. You're going to be buying fresh food. And this can, for those of you that work in the mental health field, this alone can be really challenging, because if you've got someone who's unmotivated, who's struggling to get out of bed, who's maybe battling with a bit of agoraphobia, this in itself can be a huge step. And I think we need to really be compassionate to that and respectful about that, about how difficult it can be. So we do have the benefit of sort of buying online groceries, or like I said, if you've got a local farmers market that's maybe not as intimidating as a big, noisy, bright lit, you know, Woolies or Coles store, that might be a way to go about it. But my first step would always be, let's get in whole foods. My second big thing would, sorry, Christine, there was a question? Okay. When you're ready, come off mute and ask. My second big thing would probably really be about getting that gut flora correct. I know that that's something, if we can get the gut flora correct and improve those symptoms, like we just talked about with Elizabeth, a lot of people are going to feel better. It's going to bring down inflammation. It's going to get rid of the brain fog. It's going to bring in some clarity. They might get better sleep. And again, if you work in mental health, getting people good sleep is a huge battle. So getting those inflammatory foods and bringing down the inflammation is really going to benefit a lot of people. And the other thing, I'd actually bring in the mindfulness. I think just really seeing eating as something sacred, as a sacred moment where you nourish yourself, where you're grateful for what nature has provided, where you're taking this moment for yourself to nourish and say, I love you, and I'm going to give you good food so that you can be well and you can heal. I think that's such a perfect mindset to be in to tackle this as well. So Sylvia, they'd be my 3 things.
Thank you. That's lovely.
Christine,
all right. Christine, did you have a question? I have to unmute you.
Have we got you? The mute button is, if you hover over your own face.
I've got it. I've got it now. Yeah. Oh no, thank you. That's been so interesting. I wonder, is there any research around the influence of food and nutrition is with acute psychosis?
Yeah, look, acute psychosis is obviously something we tread incredibly careful with, and we
Yeah.
do require a medical response, and we be responsible with it. But I think there's many steps that lead to ending up in acute psychosis.
Mm.
And I
So
think
is there anyone that's looked at psychosis and food as a way of supporting perhaps
there is, and if again
recovery?
go on a little bit of a Google dig, you will find it. And again, the outcomes of a lot of that research tends to go more into prevention. So having that good lifestyle before we get to that point is usually where you come from. Once we're in a psychosis, it's a crisis situation. And unfortunately, a lot of the time we come in with drugs and medications and, that's needed in that exact moment. But when I've had patients who've come to me and said, maybe in the last 12 months, I've had 3 acute psychosis situations, I go, okay, my job here is to help you prevent that from happening again, to hold. And that's where we start coming in and really looking at what nutrition are they getting in? Can they get it in across that gut wall? What's the microbiome doing with the neurotransmitters? Because those neurotransmitters play a huge role in going into acute psychosis. That's where we all of a sudden, where we've been a little bit unbalanced, all of a sudden we go like that, and we've got this huge imbalance of the neurotransmitters that sends us into psychosis. So again, we're just trying to create stability. The body loves balance and stability and what we call homeostasis, which means maintaining our own balance. So we would work preventatively rather than, I don't think the hospital's going to call me when someone comes into a psychosis.
No, I don't mean, I suppose what I mean is, yes, I didn't mean literally, so I should have been clearer. In an acute psychotic episode, you couldn't say have more fish oil and you'll be right. But as a way of perhaps, assisting recovery and supporting recovery and helping people stay well.
Definitely.
And maybe avoid an increase in medication.
Absolutely.
Which often happens.
And you know what reminds me of a really interesting story, and I don't know if those of you that know the story, The Christmas Carol, with Scrooge and that, I'm watching children's Christmas shows at the moment, so forgive the strange analogy that I'm going to play with this. But there is a line in The Christmas Carol where Scrooge sees his first Christmas ghost of his past that comes to him. And the original writing of the prose for this story is that Scrooge is having these hallucinations. He's at home alone in the middle of the night and he's having these hallucinations of the ghosts of Christmas past, And what he says in the prose is, it could be that I've overworked. It could be that I've eaten a bad piece of meat. And I really paid attention to that because it shows that all those years, again, there was this awareness that if he ate a bad piece of meat, he could have gone into a hallucinogenic psychosis and be seeing the ghosts. So it just, as I was watching this with the kids the other night, it really stood out to me. And I went, wow, even Scrooge knew that some bad food in a leaky gut could have caused him to go into a bit of a psychosis. So again, just shows that gut link to mental health.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's good. Thank you. You're
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Lara. We need to finalise now, and there's so much more. I'm sure everyone still will be thinking about questions long after we finish today. It was a very enlightening and engaging presentation, so thank you for that. You really have given us a lot to think about here. And I'd like to thank everyone who's come as well for joining us today and for contributing to the discussion. I think events like this are really a great way to explore the many dimensions of mental health and well-being. And we'll continue this conversation beyond today, I'm sure. So if you'd like to learn more about the topics we've explored or about the Master of Mental Health program, some of you who are familiar with it already, but please don't hesitate to reach out and visit our visit our website if you are. And we'd also love to see you at future events in this conversation series here at Tien as well. We'll have plenty more for you next year. And once again, I just want to say a very, very big thank you and so much gratitude for you, Lara, for being part of this session. And take care and enjoy the rest of your day for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lara. Thanks, Sylvia.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everybody.